I want to show you guys a few of the things they do for the prep. So these are a couple guys taking the loads of sand, and then they throw the sand, the raw sand, on this screen, and then they shake the scoops of sand to get the rocks out of the sand. They have a wheelbarrow underneath, because as I mentioned, when they render, it's a sand and cement mix, and it has to be fine sand, so you can't have these pebbles, if you will, when you render, because it has to be smooth. So that's how they make the sand fine for the rendering. Thanks, guys. So here is the trusses being built. So it's steel gets delivered to the site. Then you have a welder. So there's our welder, and he is building the trusses for the house. Now these trusses are 15 meters long. So if you do that math, it's about 48 feet. So that's the length of the house, 48 feet. So he's building, I believe the plans call for 8 trusses, and they're like 2 meters apart when they're up on top of the beam. So there'll be the columns that go up from the base of the house. Then there'll be concrete beams that go across the columns, and then the tie beams that are down under grade holding the columns together. And then there'll be these trusses, and you can see how long they are, and that's gonna span the opening of the house. You know, we wanted a Western style house, we wanted open concept, so the engineer needed to have quite a long span. So you can see this is 15 meters long, and there'll be 8 of them. So that's an engineering challenge, but the guys are building these trusses right on site. Then what I also wanted to show you is how they make the columns out of rebar. So I'll go down here and I'll show you what these guys are doing. Now these columns here are actually for the fence, but they are bending the rebar. So they get loads of rebar, which is, here's the supply rebar. And then here is one column that's being built. And then here's the, if you call it, the bending station. So what they do is they put the rebar on this cocoa lumber, and they're bending the rebar, and he happened to be making stirrups now, and the stirrups are used to hold the column together. So they cut the rebar to length, and then they bend the rebar to the proper shape. So again, a lot of manual labor, and they are doing this for every column in the house, carport, pergola, and fence. All has these columns that are all made by hand. So then here's an example of an almost finished one. So the fence has 4 pieces of rebar, and then these stirrups that he has a supply of here go around those strands, and then they tie it with wire. You can see how they tie it with wire to hold it together. And then once that is done, they stack them up, and they're ready to be put in place. So here's an example, and this is the fence line that goes up the property. So here's an example of one type of column, and then there's the footing for the column, and then the rebar that's down in the footing that'll have that 6 to 8 inches of cement. The column is tied to that rebar. So I don't know if you can see it. I'll try to get down a little closer because it's a meter deep. But there's wire tying the column to the rebar that'll be down in the footing. They're tied it with wire. And then that'll be filled with cement. And then once that hardens, they'll be ready to pour the column. And you can see all the way up the property line. That's what they're doing. And then if I can actually make it over there, I can show you an example of one that's poured. If I don't trip on the way. So there's an example that's obviously not poured, and then this is when they put that 6 to 8 inches of cement down in the footing, and that cement mix is a little different. That actually has rocks in with the cement for strength, which is different from the sand and cement mix for the rendering, so it's a different mix. But they'll let that set a couple of days and harden. So just wanted to show you guys some of the behind the scenes work that these guys are doing. Mostly manual labor, and they're doing a great job. Talk to you guys later.